Let's fight. Let's fight, guys. Ringsiders, how are we doing tonight? A good evening to each and every one of you. And I'm so privileged that you could all be here this evening, whether you're joining us on Twitter, whether you're joining us on YouTube, Facebook. Welcome in the ring, folks. Quite a few things to discuss this evening, and I have some eminent, esteemed guests with me this evening, and I'm privileged to be with you another evening. It's Tuesday night, and we're discussing education in the pandemic, among other issues that we have for you. So share the live stream, and let's get going, folks. It's good to see so many of you who are on this evening, and I'm going to be doing my bit to share this live stream as well. So let me get right to that, folks, and ensure that we are good to go. All right, so let me jump to that and ensure that the live stream is shared at my ends too. So good to see each and every one of you guys. Really good to see each and every one of you. Very, very heartened to see all of you guys here with us this evening. How was your day? We hope you had a good day at work. If you're still on the job, well, we're happy that you're spending this little time with us. For the folks at Kokwani, one guy at Kokwani said, Mr. Duncan, when I met him over the weekend there, he said, you cost me a lot of money, but it's worth it. It means that he has to buy the data to watch the show. And guys, I'm so heartened that you go through all that trouble to stay in touch with this program. The folks in Bartico as well gave us a good welcome over the weekend. And we're tremendously happy that all of you guys join us from region 1 to 11. The diaspora is region 11. We are privileged that you guys join us each and every night. All right, so let me finish sharing this live stream on my end, and we hope that you guys are doing the same on your side. Let me just make sure that we are good to go, and then we're going to get the ball rolling, folks. Let me just ensure that we are a go at my end. I got to share a couple of places, and then we get started. Let me just ensure that we are good to go. So many things to check. This is like flying an aircraft. So many aspects to check, guys. Just to ensure that we are up and running. All right, so let me ensure that we're good to go. We don't want any false starts. All right, we look like we're good at that end. A couple more places, and then we're going to be right with you guys. Bear with us as we get things going. Hope you guys had a good day. Hope you guys put in the work that was expected of you. All right, I'm almost ready. 2 other places I need to share the live stream to. Almost ready, folks. Almost ready. And so many of you are already on. You say, oh, y'all fast. So many of you are already on. And I'm happy. I fast. I want you all to know that. I am just as fast, guys. All right? All right. I'm almost ready to go. All right. Share the live stream. We beg of you. We ask of you. And I'm practicing what I'm requiring of you guys here. Yep. And we're almost ready. Good to go. Folks, I'm finished at my end. Did what I had to do. And I'm now moving on. I'm almost ready to start. Guys, I really hope that you guys have had a good day. Really hope that you guys have had a good day. And we are ready to go. Ready to go. Ready, steady. All right. Let's get through our hot topics. We're almost at our magic number, believe it or not. We are almost there, and we're looking nice. I can't lie to you. We're looking real nice. I am so hurried to have my guests on. I could skip the hot topics, but I know y'all wouldn't forgive me at all. So we can do things properly. I know y'all wouldn't forgive me at all, folks. All right. And we are just about where we need to be. I'm ready to go. I can tell you that much. I am ready to go. Fired up and ready to go with my hot topics. Guys, as you know, here's where we promote the truth and we defend the facts. Welcome in the ring, wherever you're joining us from. On YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, Hello to our Twitterverse and all the folks who follow us at that end, whichever page you're joining us from. Let us know where you're receiving us from this evening. And it's good to see so many of you, Patricia Asana, Kishan and Lena, Joel Ward, Orvin Henry, Dan Fordyce, Carla Washington and Bernice, Lisa, all of you guys who make the show what it is. Let's get through our hot topics and let's get our discussion on the road this evening, guys. Again, so privileged to see each and every one of you. And we are about ready to go. Just about ready. All right. And let's start on the international scene, folks. And not too far afield, right next door in Trinidad, we learned just over the weekend that the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago is COVID positive. And we know that he has been one of those persons who've been out in the forefront, really as a leader in this pandemic, trying to keep the numbers down in Trinidad and Tobago. And it was reported today, as a matter of fact, by the Division of Health and Wellness and Family Development, I think in Tobago, that the Prime Minister rather of Trinidad and Tobago is COVID-19 positive. And so we're watching that, and we're going to bring you additional information as we have it, guys. Following that, we're looking at some law and order right home here in Guyana. And today we learned that a gentleman was picked up for questioning in the murder of Mr. Fagundes. And of course, this was just about an hour or so after the police had issued a wanted bulletin. As a matter of fact, we learned that he had turned himself into the police. And so, again, the Fagundes issue, Ricardo Fagundes was fatally shot outside of Palm Court on Main Street just a few weeks ago. And I'm certain by now you know the details of that. And Mr. Roger Khan, who he was with, the infamous Roger Khan, had asked at his funeral for an impartial investigation. He has pleaded with the head of state, Mr. Irfan Ali, for an impartial investigation. And now we see that somebody has been picked up in relation to that brutal slaying of Mr. Fagundes on Main Street. And we are going to, again, keep our eyes on this issue to report on it in subsequent broadcasts and programs. Folks, let's turn our attention to local government. Let's turn our attention to local government. And quite recently, we saw some commentary coming out of Nigel Darmalal about local government and us needing a new voters list before we can go to local government elections, which are constitutionally mandated to be held this year. As you know, local government election is held every 3 years, and so they are constitutionally mandated to be held this year. And we see now Nigel Darmalal from saying outright that we are having local government elections this year to now setting precondition. He says that a new voters list is dependent on the removal of senior officials from GCOM there. Quite an about face from what they were asking for in 2015, because in an October 6th, 2015 publication out of Stabrook News, they had said that, as a matter of fact, let me read a couple paragraphs of the publication. It said the opposition PPP called today for electoral reforms to be placed on the front burner, including a fresh voters list, improved biometrics, electronic voting, and a new chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. This was the PPP in 2015, again, calling for a new voters list. The publication goes on to state, having refused to accept the results of this year's general election, the PPP said, after 23 years with absolutely no reform at GCOM to cater for institutional strengthening through more transparent and impartial practices, the time has come for reforms to be placed on the front burners. Mind you, they themselves said that GCOM had no reforms for 23 years under their administration of the country. So they set no precondition in 2015 asking for new voters list, and now they're saying that a new voters list is only dependent on whether we have those senior management officials at GCOM gone. That is the preconditions they are setting. So we're watching that, and we're going to have more for you on that. We turn our attention now to COVID-19, much of which our discussion is going to be focused on this evening, education and COVID-19. But we would have you know that after many, many pushes and cajoling and prompting, the Minister of Health, the installed Minister of Health, Frank Anthony, today, weeks after the vaccinations landed on our shore, the vaccines rather, landed on our shore, took I think it's the Sputnik vaccine today, after having to be pushed and prodded and encouraged that as Minister of Health, he should be leading by example. We were made to understand that Minister of Health Leslie Ramsamy also took the vaccine, and also Frank Anthony's wife took that vaccine. Folks, and quite strangely, we now see the government publicizing more and more that the curfew is from 10:30, the COVID-19 curfew, that is, to 4 a.m. Why did it take them so long to kind of push this on the front burner, that is from 10:30 to 4 a.m.? But, even citizens are asking for a little more than this, because we saw on social media quite recently, for instance, one Mr. Jonathan, let me get this better for you. Mr. Jonathan, sorry, this is, yes, Jagatram, rather, Tik Chan says, why not from 6 p.m.? Why not the curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.? Was the 10:30 curfew set to accommodate bars, rum shops, etc.? Why can't we have a scenario like what occurred on Easter Monday, at least for 2 weeks? Maybe then the spread of COVID-19 may start to come under control. So even the public is asking for some more restrictions in terms of where the curfew is concerned, folks. And that is where we're going to pause for our hot topics this evening. I have with me two young ladies who are very, very versed in the area that we're going to be discussing this evening, education locally. And they're on not necessarily opposite sides of the issue of education, but dealing with different aspects, rather, of education. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome this evening Dr. Nicolette Henry and Miss Coretta McDonald. And I want to welcome both of them to In the Ring tonight. Ladies, welcome.
Good evening, Sheridan. Thank you for having me.
You might just need to put your mics on for me. And again, folks, as you know, Dr. Nicolette Henry is the former Minister of Health. She is a member of Parliament, the Honorable Dr. Nicolette Henry, and also Coretta McDonald is a member of Parliament, and she is currently the General Secretary of the Ghana Teachers Union. So again, a very, very versed on the subject matter, on the discussion, which is education in the pandemic. Ladies, I'll take, let me start out with Dr. Henry. Dr. Henry, we are now more than a year in the pandemic. Of course, when we handed over office, or we were cheated out of office on August 2nd, 2020, there were 21 COVID deaths, and there were 419 confirmed COVID cases locally. Today, there are over 10,000 confirmed cases and over, I think, 270 deaths as related to COVID-19. Schools have not gone back to normalcy. Dr. Henry, tell us where we are in the midst of COVID-19.
Well, thank you, Sheridan. Good evening to our viewers. This evening, I must say thanks to Sheridan for having me on this program, where we can have this frank discussion on the effects of COVID-19 on education. I particularly want to focus on where we are, given that we are 1 year after we will have formally closed schools, and we have gone to mixed modalities in terms of delivering education. And as many of you would know, because many of you are parents and you have children, and so you are in this situation whereby we have been trying to administer education from different modalities, primarily using unlearning online technique. But what we have noticed is that in many countries, including Ghana, we have a lot of students who have not been able to participate in remote learning and teaching. And so that is a major concern for persons in education countries all over the world. And in the case of Guyana, we have not seen the kinds of plans that are required to ensure that the shocks of COVID-19 will be well absorbed, as it were, by this country. And so, what we want to ensure, particularly as a member of parliament and shadowing the education sector, is that the preparation, the policies, the programs are in place so that those students who are being affected more than others and those that are furthest behind will be able to quickly come up to speed once we are back on track and functioning as prior to the pandemic. And so it worries us, it concerns us that we have not been seeing or hearing of the plans. All we get from time to time is some knee-jerk responses and a date flying out of nowhere here and there. We heard a few weeks ago that school would have been open. Many of us knew that was not feasible in the first instance. We happen to know that common sense and better judgment would have prevailed based on the many interventions and calling on our part to ensure that the environment was safe and ready for our teachers and students. And so, as you would know, it has been further delayed in terms of face-to-face learning. So basically, what we're saying is that we need to have policies in place. We understand that there's a pandemic. We understand that the numbers are going up here, and that is making the situation even more scary. And we understand that you have to plan and prepare for the outcomes that you want, because you have to plan with the end in mind. And if we're not hearing about those plans, we're just hearing dates, we're just seeing people running around, like headless chicken around the country. You share it a few books here, a few books there. We've had enough time by now to have a robust plan and some amount of research that is specific to Guyana that we can use here to inform our decisions and policies moving forward. In the absence of that, we're very concerned and we remain skeptical as to what the future of education holds for the people of this country. Thank you, Sharad. And I think Coretta, at this point in time, may have a few additional thoughts and can
And
certainly jump
on
in
that
here.
note, Coretta, Dr. Henry did talk about the sharing out of books and the worksheets that are very common now, with the many errors still and all of that. But nonetheless, we learned quite recently, for instance, at the Providence Primary School, teachers were called in to sort out the worksheets and stamp them, or whatever is the process that ensues when they are received by the various schools, only to learn a few days later that the HM was COVID positive, and so they were exposed to her in that environment. So we see the challenges even at that level. What are some of the additional challenges that teachers are facing currently?
Sherrod, like you would know, and Nicolette knows that too, that prior to August 2020, we had in place a program, a planned program, let me say that, one that was comprehensive when it came to COVID. Like everything else, COVID came and caught all of us off of our feet. But you know what? The kick-in plan was there. And if you remember, I think Nicolette may have missed this one. If you remember, Guyana was among one of the first countries to have closed their schools. And that in itself says how much the government was thinking about not only its adults, but the future leaders of this country, and more so about the teachers of this country. What we have seen after August 2nd is that schools were reopened in September, even though there was loud crying and wailing of not reopening school at the time. Schools were reopened, and schools were reopened because, and forgive me, I'm just going to be a little funny here. She is a preposition, wants to prove a point, and I don't understand the point you want to prove with people's lives. You don't prove point with people's lives. And so the thing here is just running around the place and, oh, I am doing this and I can do that and I can do that, and just making yourself what you're not, rather than concentrating on getting serious about this whole issue of COVID, how we can protect our children and our teachers, and how we can find a better way in allowing teachers to deliver to their charges. With regards to our teachers, the GTU is very, very concerned, and we will continue to be concerned about the health and wellness of our teachers. You just mentioned Providence Primary, and it's not only Providence Primary. We have many, many other schools. We had St. Cuthbert's, we had Santa Rosa in Maruca, we had Bartica, we had Essequibo Coast, we had Berbice, we had West Coast Berbice, all over the place. And still this does not seem to ring a bell that we have to come to the table, sit there, put our heads together so that we can think constructively. And I would want to repeat that. Think constructively, because Cheryl, let me say this to you and your viewers, and maybe for Nikki too. When we sit at the level of the Ministry of Education and the GTU, we sit there as a professional group of people to discuss policies, to agree, to disagree, and to agree on ideas, and to form policies that are going to take this nation forward, that our teachers would have to implement. But you know, from August 2nd to now, we have had a lot of circus. We got lots and lots of circus, and we have lots and lots of clowns in the circus arena. And sometimes I have to be very, very vocal, because when I get all kinds of political stupidness coming into the conversations, I have to say things like this. Let me give you one example. We had the issue where the president of the GTU made the call that teachers have been owed monies, outstanding monies, 2020, 2019. We've not been able to complete for 2019, and we have 2020 that came and joined that. And rather than we would have had responses like, oh, we are waiting on the Ministry of Finance, and oh, we are waiting on the Ministry of Finance. So the president got upset and he said, I cannot continue to tell my members that we are waiting on the Ministry of Finance. From August 2020 to now, which would have been a month ago, you're waiting on Ministry of Finance. I'm not going to tell my members that. And rather than saying, okay, you know, we're going to let's work together and see if we can approach Ministry of Finance as a team. Rather than saying that, we got the response like, I didn't leave you with this. I inherited this. I came and I inherited this. So I had to respond to that. And I said, the kind of foolishness I hear at these meetings, I don't want to hear them. Everybody inherit from somebody. I said, you forgot that the coalition inherited from you after 23 years, a housing project that never got on its footing. While the coalition was there, Mr. Welch, who was PS, he was on the verge of establishing a team, and Nikki would tell you that. He was on the verge of establishing a separate unit within the ministry to deal with that housing project. That was what the coalition inherited from the PPP. So I had to mention that to remind the people, don't tell me about what you inherited. I said, you're in government, you wanted to be there, fix it. Just do it. Don't tell me what you inherit. And so these are the kinds of crazy exchanges that we have sometimes, and the crazy responses. Hence the reason for saying the kind of foolishness. You remember, Sherrod, in Parliament the other day. Rather than sticking to what you ought to do, people get very arrogant, and they want to make all sorts of foolish remarks. But coming back to our teachers, just about an hour ago, we had a branch meeting with the teachers from the East Coast and the East Bank of Demerara, and our teachers are resolute. They are concerned about COVID, and they're not going to risk their lives and the lives of other family members because They have to, some education officers saying to them, you have to go out there, you have to go and distribute booklets, you have to collect booklets, you have to do this, you have to do that. They are very resolute, and they're going to stand firm that unless we decide on a serious policy that would protect the teachers as well as their charges, teachers are not going to be risking their lives. I think I said a mouthful.
and and well said. Dr. Henry, on that note, General Secretary McDonald has outlined several shortcomings in the current administration, if you want to call it a policy. They wanted a certain category of students to go back to school, but we saw the various schools and how COVID started to infect our students. At the policy end, should they have been by now a policy which says that our teachers are frontline workers and they are going to be receiving the vaccines first and foremost? We haven't seen that kind of policy.
Well, thank you, Sharon. And I'm happy that you're speaking about policy. Because if you want to be honest and if you want to be fair, you would know that at the level of the minister, it is policy decisions that is paramount. Because you are responsible for policy and administration. We have not seen any policies come into effect from August to now. What we have seen is a lot of fluff and bluff and people running around the place. There are officers who have to do their work in terms of getting the workbooks and so to the students. I mean, it's good sometimes if you can have a presence and you can give the reassurance and all of that. But certainly the public servants need to get their work done and they need to be supported. And the minister needs to be putting in place the policies. I've not seen and heard of any. I've gone on the ministry's website. And, you know, it's really unfortunate because in the absence of that policy and direction, there would be very little guidance to the staff in terms of what is required and what is expected. And that is a grave deficiency. In fact, when I went to the ministry to work as Minister of Education during the coalition governance of this country, there was definitely a deficit where policies were concerned. And we've put policies in place, and I can speak to the policies that we've put in place, but to speak to the COVID-19 specific, even as we were demitting office, I had championed and worked with the staff of the ministry, many of them who are still there, in terms of developing what we call public education remote learning and teaching scheme, which is a policy document to guide how we will operate during COVID-19 pandemic. Some of that is being utilized, but I believe that because there is more information now and more evidence, and we see more people are getting infected, then it ought to be revised at a minimum. You know, you were given that on a platter. I would expect that there be some revisions. Or you wake up every morning and you see some activity happening, but in the absence of a broader policy framework, which is very important and very integral. And we go to that parliament and we pass money every budget for policy and administration, and you don't see one policy in place after two budgets. It's a main concern. And we have our teachers there in many countries, in many jurisdictions. Teachers are classified as frontline workers. Here in Guyana, based on the data, they will have to make the call. I don't have access to the data because there's no data that is being shared out there. I'm not an employee of the Ministry of Education, and I certainly could not provide you with the data. But from an anecdotal perspective, based on even the situation that was just alluded to by both yourself and Coretta, it speaks to my mind that teachers are at great risk, and therefore there needs to be some sort of classification. I did hear quite an ad hoc call at some point in time that teachers should be included for vaccine, how the vaccination program work, where teachers fall in terms of the order of priority. That has never been clarified. It has never been clear. And so when you work with ad hoc systems, you create so many fault lines. You create so many gaps. You create further disparities in the delivery of education as a service and a public good. Now I can tell you, when we get back into office, it's a lot of mess. Again, you just have to be going there and cleaning up. And so it just, it would be good to see that that this country gets to a place where we can continue to build on what exists rather than be retrogressive and just keep going back. You make 3 steps forward and you get back 10 steps. Then somebody's got to come and get that job done. I don't know who that person will be, but I can tell you, based on all that I have seen, there's a lot of inequities that are being further allowed to be fertilized in this pandemic, because simple things that could be done at the policy level has just not kicked in as yet. We haven't heard of those policies. And so every opportunity that I have, I will continue to call out the Ministry of Education, and in particular the Minister of Education, whose responsibility it is to ensure that we get the policies right. I looked through what was submitted in the 2021 budget, and I spoke about this in Parliament. Everything that nothing new to begin with. You would believe that 1 year into a pandemic, and you would not find anything new in a sector like education. I can tell you, Guyana would be the only country, at least in this part of the world, where that would be the case. But what you have every day is people just running around the place, sharing out, workbooks, which of course they have a lot of errors. But that aside, which you're not even getting back to in terms of feedback, and checking in with students and having an opportunity, because that could be done virtually, but we're not seeing that. So it is just window dressing. It's as though you're campaigning, and sometimes people it's difficult if you kind of want to hoodwink people to transition from politicizing things to really delivering public service that is of a high quality and that is definitely beneficial to the people of the country. And sometimes I think as citizens, I want to hear more from the citizens asking and calling on government to provide good service and to provide good governance. Because who benefits at the end of the day if you run around with a set of workbooks that you never even check to see if the work is correct? And in the first instance, there's so much errors in the books that it might be disadvantageous to the people even receiving the books. Who are the beneficiaries of that? Except for those who will have a few photo ops and run around the place to say, I've been doing this, I've been doing that. Education delivery is much more than that. And if you don't believe me, you don't have to take my word for it. You look at every other country in the Caribbean, and you see what the ministers of education are doing. And you would see that they are articulating and adumbrating their policies. So Guyana will end up, suffering in the long term, and it is those disadvantaged and marginalized and vulnerable populations that will suffer the most because they don't have the resources. Even in this COVID time, some of them don't have a device, and so they're talking about using technology and going online. Online for some people is a distant dream, and I know there are going to be people out there who are going to say, but you were there, why you didn't fix it? Even before COVID. And if people are honest, they will recall, even before COVID, as Minister of Education, I had worked with the staff at the policy level to ensure that every child in this country in the next 5 years must have access to a device given by the government. And we had even received a grant from UNICEF, where I had worked with the permanent secretary and other staff to determine to what extent that can push our drive of ensuring that every child would be the recipient of a device. And that was before COVID-19.
And Dr. Henry, even with that, even at the telecommunication end, we saw, a broadening of the government of the reach of, for instance, Wi-Fi and broadband through what we call ICT hubs that are benefiting this current administration under these COVID-19 circumstances and conditions.
Well, when you talk about foresight, I think I have to give credit where it's due, because we've demonstrated a lot of foresight, Sharon. In fact, we've had a minister of the government just dedicated telecommunications, Minister of Public Telecommunication. A lot of people may not have recognized where that was going because sometimes, a lot of people miss these things because people tend to gravitate towards the more juicy things and the things that can, run around and make the Facebook posts and that kind of thing. But to have a minister directly dedicated and committed to public telecommunication was a great, great support to the education sector and the other service delivery sectors. Because what we were able to do is to bring technology to communities where they have never even heard of technology, but they were experiencing technology. Uh, and so we were able to, I recall going to Latam on the 15th of February 2 years ago. It was my birthday, actually. That's how I spent my birthday. I opened a smart classroom in that community. Because for me, what is important is about ensuring that we reduce the gaps and disparities, and the students that were most marginalized and disadvantaged could be beneficiaries so that we can continue to eradicate poverty wherever it exists in those remote and hinterland communities. Because they're the people who are feeling the brunt of all of the disadvantages that we experience here. And so for me, on a very personal level and for the party, it's really unfortunate that a lot of what we have started has not been able to continue, and we saw a lot of retrogression. We're going back into pre-2015 times, which would certainly not be advantageous to the people of Guyana. But at the end of the day, what we have to do is ensure that we raise awareness and we let people know what they must accept. And I think that people must begin to speak out when they're not getting the kinds of services that they deserve and they require. We're spending a lot of money. We pass it every year. You pass the biggest budget, the biggest budget. It must mean something to the people out there.
That's right. And on that note, General Secretary McDonald, talking about the biggest money a budget and having lots of money in the system. Lots of money went to education. But we talked about some of the challenges faced by teachers under this COVID-19 pandemic. What are some of the things you have been talking to the Minister of Education as perhaps the bare minimum where we should be meeting our teachers, especially at this time?
Sherrod, we have discussed with the Ministry of Education, the minister being present at all of those meetings. We had 2 months passing, and then we made a representation for our teachers, and we said to the minister, we should engage Digicel and GTT so that they can offer either a reduced package for teachers or put together a special package for teachers, because teachers have been using their own data at home. Teachers have been lending to students, especially those who are at home, sharing with them their space so that children can be actively engaged in their whether it's a Zoom class or a WhatsApp class or Edmodo class, whatever class it was. And we've asked that since this COVID pandemic is upon us, and the teachers have been so burdened with not only their own share of the pie in terms of their children and other things to do within their families, we've asked that special consideration be given to teachers. Of course, like everything else, you get the promise. Yes, I spoke to them, and we're going to be looking at something, and they've outlined this, but you still can't say to us what were the outlines. We're still waiting to see that happen. We've
Platitudes,
asked that.
platitudes.
Sorry.
I was saying
Yes,
that the
we've
minister is
asked.
giving just platitudes.
I didn't get that one clearly, but I'll continue and we'll pick up from there. And we've asked that teachers be considered with regards to whether you're going to give them a tablet or you're going to give them a laptop. And those are just those requests. They just slide. And you know what's very, very disturbing, and it's piercing the heart. It's the fact that Coretta McDonald happens to be a MP for the coalition. And so when Coretta McDonald makes these requests for teachers, it can't happen because it's coming from Coretta McDonald, which is very, very silly. The fact is, we are here talking about our teachers, not GTU's teachers, our teachers. And if you equip our teachers, then they'll be able to function even better. We're still waiting to have some sort of consideration being given there. I remember when I raised the issue of the care packages, because Cheryl, you would remember there was this big issue about and this big sharing on Facebook about the care packages for teachers and care packages for the students and the pupils. Well, you know what the care packages were all about. And so I asked, with what frequency are we going to be replenishing these care packages? And of course, Cheryl, the answers I come in for sometimes. So, sometimes I would say I look for them, but I have to ask. And so I got the response to my question. My question was a very, very genuine one out of love and care for our teachers, because let me tell you what, at GTU's level, we have been offering packages to our teachers, but we don't have to broadcast that because those teachers are our teachers and they have to go out there. The ones in the secondary schools who've got to face the 10, 11, and 12 grades, they have to go out there. Those who are dealing with the grades 5 and 6, some of them have ventured into schools, they have to go out there. They have to return to be at school every 2 weeks to uplift the worksheets, mark, distribute more worksheets. So we're concerned about our teachers. So we have offered packages to our teachers. We didn't have to broadcast that. But when I asked, because of this big publication with the care packages, I was told I didn't have to do this because other countries are not doing it. So I didn't have to do this. And what if they don't get any more, they're going to stop teaching? That's the kind of arrogance we have coming from what is supposed to be the Minister of Education. I mean, I'm sorry for saying it like that, but I have to say it like that, because in a situation like this, we expect even more from our teachers, because our students are not having the face-to-face classes, and the kinds of distraction we can have when our children are at home and they're logged in with a computer and they're sometimes on a phone doing something else, or they're logged in and another sister would have to use the phone at some point, or a brother got to use the laptop at some point, or mommy got to go out and she has to go with her phone. And so we were sharing these bits of ideas and making these requests, that look, we should have ABC given to the teachers, we should replenish within a certain time. And of course, with all the monies that have been budgeted for education, and you hear, I didn't have to do this, we just do it. And GTU could approach other places and ask them to do. I mean, these are our teachers. And it's GTU and Ministry of Education's business to ensure that our teachers are safe. Not other companies, not other persons, but GTU and the ministry. But I'm saying, I just mentioned that to say where our meetings go sometimes. And let me say this one. It's surprising that at our meetings, when we expect to have very frank discussions at our meetings and have ideas coming from here and ideas coming from here, at our meetings, most of the times you have either one or two persons speaking at the meetings. Nobody else says anything unless you're being told, well, X, you were supposed to do something, you got it right. Yes. Nobody else saying anything at the meeting. GTU would speak, and we have one or two persons speaking from the Ministry of Education on behalf of the Ministry of Education. And that is just saying to you where we are at present, that the business of dictatorship has not only been at the level of Parliament, but we have seen it at every single ministry. You've seen Darmlal doing the same thing. You see Wanajil doing the same thing. You see Kwame Mokai doing the same thing. Education doing the same thing. All the ministries doing the same foolishness. So people are very fearful. Some of the education officers, they don't even want to talk to you. It's okay for them to WhatsApp you, but they don't want to talk to you in public, for fear of victimization. Some of the staff don't even, they're not comfortable talking to you in the open because of fear of victimization. And I'm saying this ought not to happen. in this pandemic, all of us, the stakeholders, GTU and the Ministry of Education, and I can bring the Teaching Service Commission in at this time. We ought to come together and work for the benefit of all. I just want to share this little bit. This is outside of COVID, but let me just share this. As partners, I know over the years as partners, when it came to International Women's Day and other activities, the ministry and GTU and the Teaching Service Commission, we would combine and we would do what we have to do. You know, this year it was totally different. This year it was the Ministry of Education alone. GTU was not involved, neither was the Teaching Service involved. And you know why? Because GTU has now been considered wholly and solely a coalition unit. And the Teaching Service Commission, of course, you know, we got Mr. Alan Monroe there, and the GTU has Avril Crawford there. So the Teaching Service Commission and GTU on the side. No partnership with them unless you want to you know, you want to share something and you want to have this picture taken and then you put it on Facebook. Oh, we had a meeting and we had this. Yes, that's where we are right now. We're not serious about anything. But our teachers, again, let me say, our teachers are very, very concerned. Some of them are very scared with this vaccine that we're talking about. We did at the last meeting we had, we did indicate to the Ministry of Education that it would be a good thing for us to have doctors. We can have a Zoom panel, and we have doctors there sharing with our teachers so that it would erase some of the fears that teachers are having. We're still waiting to see that happen on that larger scale with the Ministry of Education and the GTU. But I can tell you what, every third Thursday in the month, we have our GTU and U program, and we would have already had, we already had there Dr. Watts, I think is his name. I think it's Dr. Watts was there, and he went through this whole issue with COVID and the vaccine and so on with our teachers. We're supposed to have another follow-up with of that program with 2 other doctors, so that it can bring some sort of semblance, because I know many of our teachers have been saying, well, they're not taking the vaccine. They're not going to take the vaccine. At one point they were saying we needed to see the Minister of Education taking her vaccine. But now I'm hearing the teachers saying, well, since the Minister of Health is still considering, they are in the same mood. They are still considering whether they are going to be taking the vaccine. So that's where we are right now.
And what you outlined to us at the end there, in terms of the breaking up of the this cohesion we had between the your GTU and the Service Commission and so forth, that doesn't sound like a policy of oneness and a policy that talks about the corridor of unity and ministry of happiness and so forth. That doesn't sound like that at all. But Dr. Henry, you know, at the policy level, we understand and we recognize by now that this is an installed administration that is short on policy and even shorter on its promises, because we learned, for instance, at this last budget reading, that there was something in the budget for public servants, including teachers, in terms of an increase in salary. But we haven't seen that. We heard on the campaign trail about free education at UG. We have not seen that. So in terms of policy, Dr. Henry, what should this government be focusing on in terms of policy, even at a basic framework level?
One is quality and 2 is access. You have to ensure that you continue to improve the quality of whatever is being delivered. And you have to ensure that your population have access to the services. And that is why you would hear, if you listen to anybody in education, any part of the world, you would hear focus in terms of reducing disparities, in terms of underserved populations, in terms of reviewing curriculums, in terms of ensuring that teachers' support, preparation, and training is continuously reviewed, and that those are general education narrative, any part of the world you go, developing or develop. We haven't heard that at all. So, for instance, one will have to ask, and I can clearly articulate policies that were passed in the coalition's time. And for instance, let me give you two policies right off the bat. We reintegrate teenage mothers back into the school system. So there's a document that you can go on the ministry website if they haven't taken it down, but at least I have my copy still. You will see reintegration of teenage mothers into the education system. That's a policy that Guyana has in place. Guyana is one of two Caribbean countries, to have such a policy. And that was done during our tenure. And why are we focusing on that? Because if you're a teenage mother, you'll be classified as a disadvantaged person because of the circumstance. And so in order for you to get back into the school system, and so what that did, it provided you with access. So as I said, in education, you run on two legs. It's quality and it's access. And so a lot of the policies would be around that. So when I'm speaking about policies in terms of COVID-19, it is how students will access education during the pandemic. So for instance, when it comes to teachers, even before pandemic, we had introduced a policy of one laptop per teacher. It is really unfortunate that instead of strengthening that and expanding it now in terms of not only teachers, but students, the government has very clearly said that they're reverting to one laptop per family. But you know that given with the COVID-19 situation and where the world is moving, even before COVID-19, that every child needs to have a device. So it's one laptop per child. Nobody who's thinking straight and going back to no one laptop per family now. We've gone that, we've passed that way. We've traveled that way. We've moved forward. So sometimes these things are quite comical. But I don't know if it's a point they want to prove. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a capacity issue. I don't know what it is. But it can be a combination of issues. But definitely, if you are serious, you will ensure that you devise the policies that would put the structural interventions in place so that those persons that are working in the fields, like the teachers and the education officers, and so when they're implementing it, you know exactly what gaps they're filling because you've put those structures in place. And so you're going now in the field to ensure that that is being realized. But you're not going in the field to do their job. And sometimes, during our time, you would have seen the minister in the field, but the minister was in the field for a different purpose. And that's why we would have gotten some of the outcomes that we got. A lot of people felt that it was fluked and it was just magical and it was just luck on the part of the coalition. But things don't happen like that. You have to prepare. You have to put systems in place. You have to work at it. And you have to know what you're about. A lot of times we seem to be living in a reality TV time where all people want is to ensure that they're there on Facebook. But it really calls for a lot of serious work. And so I can tell you, because even though I'm not in government, I still continue to provide service because I provide service for countries in the Caribbean in terms of comprehensive sexuality education through the United Nations. And I can tell you what is happening in other countries because I'm supporting the work that is being done in many of the jurisdictions. And so this is not something that you wake up one morning and you just dream up and you fantasize. People are really putting a lot of effort into their work. In fact, today I was finalizing of the letters of invitations for the 22 countries in the region that will be participating in a formative assessment in terms of looking to see what are the gaps and what we were not able to deliver even during the COVID period as it relates to reaching young people, vulnerable populations, students in and out of school. So work is happening, I can tell you, at the policy level in most of the countries. It's unfortunate that sometimes you really don't see the seriousness in getting a lot of the groundwork done because you have to have data that is specific to your country, specific to your population, so that when you are implementing your policies, you know that you're coming from not only a top down, but also a bottom up. So you're feeding the system with information that you get from the people on the ground.
Yep.
And
And
so I'm
Dr.
really
Henry,
making a
go
call
ahead.
to see much more work at the policy level.
And on that note, Dr. Henry and General Secretary McDonald, the David Granger-led administration of New AFC, the last government, had a very eloquent policy. As a matter of fact, starting the decade, the then president, His Excellency David Arthur Granger, declared it a decade of development, of which one of the pillars under that policy, that vision, was an education nation. Could we see the fulfillment of that on an installed administration that we have in the PPP, or will it be a fleeting illusion to be pursued but never attained? Will that be the case?
You know, I've been saying time and time again, during my days at CPC, we were taught to adapt best practices, tweet for your use, and you build on them. What we have seen coming from this de facto government, this installed regime, is APNU didn't do anything. All they know to do is to start and they can't complete. They can't do this, they can't do that. That's all we've been getting. And you know what? When you sit on the outside and you look on, and you're saying, but wait, APNU and do this, APNU can't do that, APNU this, that. But it's the same principles, the same policies that were there, you are still using. But yet you're saying, we didn't do, we didn't this, we didn't that. And of course, you know the girl, you know how the girl is behave. But the thing is, unless we become professionals and unless we have a care for our people and the nation's children, the Ministry of Education under this regime would not be able to make education move in the direction that we ought to go. And Dr. Henry will tell you, under the PPP, we have never seen the percentage of English and math in our country rising to the level it was under the last 5 years. You check it. You go after we finish here, you go and check it. Check what was our English performance, check what was our performance in math, check all the other subject areas and compare them with what happened in the last 5 years. So sometimes I just have to put that on the table when I hear people talking. I just put that on the table to say, well, look, just look at this and you decide whether APNU did or APNU didn't. The thing about what the systems we had in place, you hear the minister at Parliament and she talking about this and that, and she boasting about all these new policies and all that she wants to do for education in Guyana and in the public system. But you know what, Sherrod? While she is boasting about implementing all of these policies in the public education system, you know her children are not in the public schools. So if she, as the minister, who promoting all these policies, who promoting all these fancy new interventions that they're going to be making, and she doesn't trust to have her children in the public education system, then you must understand whether I could trust her to have my children there, or you could trust her to have your children there. You see, the thing is not a whole lot of talks, it's doing. That's where you know, it's like you'd hear old people saying the taste of the pudding, help me, Sherrod, is the taste of the pudding is not in the looks or something like that, it's in or the man, Sherrod, you know this story.
The proof of the
Right.
pudding is in
The proof of the pudding, right, is not in the looks, it's in the taste. So when you see the minister flouncing herself all around the place and talking about all the policies, and she going here to cut ribbons for smart classrooms and all kinds of things, she gone to Lethem and she gone to all the villages in Region 9 and she distributed a tablet or two or five tablets and so on, and she make a big thing about it. Ask her where are her children. Put your children in the public schools. If you so believe in what you are doing in the public schools, put your children there and allow your children to shine. So you can say to parents out there, you can say to this nation, look, as Minister of Education, my children went through the public schools and look how they would have evolved. Look what they've done. Look how successful my children are because they are part of the policies that I would have implemented. But she entrusts to have her children there. So you get the full picture that this whole thing is just a circus going on. You jump up here and there, you take out a whole lot of pictures. Sometimes you don't have on any mask and you want to tell people's children what to do and tell other persons what to do, and you just masquerade yourself around the place. We have to get serious about this business, and we have to understand that COVID is real. Just yesterday, I was telling some folks that it was this regime who told lots and lots of our citizens that COVID is not real. The coalition telling you about COVID because they don't want you to come out, because they don't want you to do this, because they don't want you to do that. And so many citizens are still believing that COVID is not real. Hence the reason for us, not, if you remember what happened during the coalition days, we had a curfew time of 6, I think it was 6 or 6:30 to 6 in the morning. Check and see what we have now. And these are the people who care. These are the people who are concerned. These are the people who talk about one Guyana. But you talk about one Guyana, but you're not showing the actions of this talk. It's just talks, and more talks. You have the curfew, 10:30 at nights to 4 o'clock in the mornings, and you care. Sometimes I get very agitated and I get very upset when I have to talk about what they're doing, because you don't tell people one thing and you do something else. If you're talking, walk the same walk that you're talking. Don't walk a walk and you talk another talk. And so with regards to our Minister of Education, and I know many persons I notice have been commenting that this is the minister who's always on Facebook, ready to attack people as soon as you talk about anything that she's doing. She's always on Facebook, and the time she takes to spend on Facebook, she should be sitting in her office and working on policies so that we can have a better education system. But I'll leave the rest to Dr. Henry.
Doc?
Well, thank you, Sharon. And what I want to say, and Coretta touching a couple of things. Sharon, 1 hour is not adequate. We have to have
very much so.
In terms of school health, I have to say that even pre-COVID, as minister, I spent a lot of time looking at school health issues and welfare issues. So much so that I had reorganized the organization structure of the ministry to accommodate a physician as a permanent staff at the ministry to advise on issues related to school health matters. Of course, that person was terminated after there was a change in government. And must be the only place that would send home a doctor during a pandemic that could advise the education ministry, which, as you know, is a critical ministry that is affected. And that physician was able to advise us. And I got feedback from my staff while I served as minister, that they really appreciated the role that the physicians played in drafting and crafting the policies. Because I can tell you, education was a serious business for the coalition government. We weren't doing guesswork. It had to be evidence-based. And you had to be able to defend it and to measure it. Because education, like health and some of the other service delivery sectors, they are clear, measurable outcomes that you can have. And so you can make assessment. And Coretta spoke about the performance of students, which is just one area that you can actually look back. And you don't have to guess. You don't have to put a face to it. All you have to do is look at the numbers and the percentages. and you can see the direction in which we were going and where we came from, and God knows what will happen as we move forward. And it is also compounded now by the pandemic, which might be used as an excuse, but still, for every student that does not reach his or her potential, full potential, is really a disservice to that person. And these numbers are not just numbers; these numbers represent the lives of people. So when you hear the 12,000 students are writing the national grade 6 examination, and only 13% of them can get more than 50% of mathematics um, pass rate, when you do the math, you understand where you're going as a country. That is nothing to be proud of, whether you're in or out of government. And so that is something that concerned me, at least. And I was particularly pleased, and I must say, I was fortunate to have had the opportunity to serve as Minister of Education in times such as this. And I can tell you, without fear of being contradicted, when I went to plan, in fact, I went to a planning meeting for budget planning at the Ministry of Finance. And I asked the permanent secretary at that time, Delmoned, I said, Delmo, I want to know what is the percentage of students who are passing these examinations. I wanted to know by gender. I wanted to know by the geography in terms of the regions and all of that, and overall. And they didn't have this data on hand because people were more preoccupied with the TV reality setting. So you just hear, so this is the top 1%, this body going to QC, this body going here, with so many people passing so many subjects. It is the untold stories of the thousands of students that we were feeling that concerned me. And I remember when I called President Granger and I told him, I told President Granger, you would not believe, 13%. He said, you want to give me an infraction? I said, no, this is, he said, I have to see the data. I sent the data to the president. And we developed what we call an emergency intervention. Because, I mean, I don't know if the ministry obviously wasn't generating the data, the public wasn't aware that of the performance of these examinations. And I have to say, I'm a parent, you know, I have a daughter who's gone through the system. And my daughter, of course, is one of the students who done well and all of that and so forth. But the point is, I had no idea that, you know, while as parents you're celebrating and that so many students were not even getting 50% because you don't hear those stories. And we decided that we were going to be transparent and that we were going to put systems in place. And I said to the staff, you know, there's a risk in doing that. Because the staff, of course, they were accustomed doing things a particular way. I said, people must know, and we have, in order to bring them along. And so we took a lot of risk as a coalition. We, of course, we were allowed to speak freely, and people, of course, saw it sometimes as a weakness on our part. But if they understand it in the long term, they would realize how important it is. And I'm happy that we took that risk because I believe now that people are more aware and people will continue to ask for that information, even while we're not in government. People want to know now because prior to 2017, nobody could tell me how many students passed by what year in terms of percentage. But people weren't asking for that because they weren't made aware that that is the kind of information that they should have. And so when we got that information, we developed a strategy as to how we were going to address it. And I remember that there were people who doubted me. Even colleagues doubted that what we were doing was the best approach. And I say tonight what I said to my colleagues then. I said, you know what? I have worked in a previous job in the President Emergency Response for AIDS Relief PEPFAR program. And I know what emergency response can do. And so I believe in it because that is my background. I come from that. And I believe that if you were to apply the principles and the elements to address any challenge that you have, you can overcome it. Particularly challenges that put our people in a disadvantageous position. And that was the approach that we took. And in a very short time, I had to say that I knew the results would be improved incrementally, but I was pleasantly surprised to the extent that we were able to improve. And I've had conversations with several persons in Guyana, out of Guyana, in the diplomatic community and international organizations, and and people are asking because they want to know if it's really sound. And how come you're doing? And I have to go into the activities that we were doing, the investments that we were making in education, and what we were projecting and how we were getting there. We weren't just sitting there guessing and wishing and hoping, and Nicolette Henry posting on Facebook that she was supposed to be the best thing since sliced bread or any such things like that. What we were doing is looking at how we will improve the lives of ordinary people, people who had not had an opportunity prior to 2015. And even in opposition, we will continue to ensure that we advocate and that we call on this installed government to ensure that they implement the kinds of policies that will result in the well-being of the people of this country. At the end of this day, you get into government because you are there to provide service. You don't get in there because you want to be a star. You want to be that you go into entertainment or something else, you know. But if you get into government, you get into politics, it's about providing service to people. It's about making people's lives better. And you can go back and I can say without fear of being contradicted that we left the education sector in a better situation than we found it. And we will continue to call on the government to improve and to leverage the gains that we've made as a country, because we believe that every child in this country, whether they were raised in a rural community or outside of Georgetown, they deserve to have the best opportunity that we can provide as a country. And so these things get me a little, worked up sometimes.
Understood. Understood. And that is the very high note, Dr. Henry, that we're going to end this evening's program on. We've gone over a couple minutes, but Dr. Nicolette Henry, former Minister of Education, Member of Parliament, Ms. Coretta McDonald, General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union, Member of Parliament as well. I want to thank both of you for walking us through the paces of the anatomy of education in the pandemic in our country for the last hour and 5 minutes thereabout. Thanks again, ladies.
Well, thank you, Sherrod. And
thank you for having us.
And great. And lots of persons are telling us we have to push this show to 2 hours. We'll take that on the advisement, as they say. Thanks again, ladies. Dr. Henry and Ms. McDonald. Thank you very much. And folks, there you have it. That's our program for this evening. But just before we go, we want to encourage you guys, as we normally do, to social distance, wear your mask, put on your mask, sanitize, and don't go out partying in these COVID times, folks, or else you might be jumping through the window of the GDF bus, and we don't want that for you guys by any measure. We don't want you guys, jumping out of moving vehicles and so forth. Coming up tomorrow, we have tomorrow is Wednesday. We are in the diaspora tomorrow night in our program, and then the day following is Talk Back Thursday in our program. But I'm looking forward for tomorrow night because I have another set of wonderful guests lined up for you guys. We're in the diaspora tomorrow night. And again, a big thank you to Dr. I don't know why I'm saying Dr. McDonald, but Dr. McDonald too, Dr. Nicolette Henry, former Minister of Education, and Ms. Coretta McDonald, the General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union. And as we end our program this evening with our discussion on education in the pandemic, we learned quite recently that the missing student from the University of Guyana, Mr. Joel Skeet, was found dead. His body in a state of decomposition. And so our thoughts and prayers go out with his friends, his family, and with his colleagues at the university. Folks, stay safe. And thanks for joining our program this evening. do stay safe. Stay safe.